Mr. President, I come to the floor today to discuss the Consolidated Appropriations Bill of 2016. I'm obviously pleased we're not going to pass another continuing resolution, which I believe is irresponsible, but at the same time, the process by which we are now considering this legislation is just as irresponsible. And as my colleague from Texas just pointed out, we are here where we are because my colleague and leader on the other side of the aisle refused to allow the appropriations bills, which had been passed through committee one by one, to be considered and voted on and amended in the fashion that the American people expects us to behave, and frankly, the Constitution demands. So here we are, after months and months of gridlock with the Democrat leader not allowing us to bring up these bills one by one. We are now faced with a $1.1 trillion bill that, in the view of many, is must pass, with literally hours to review and debate, and no amendments. No amendments. So we're faced with a situation, a parliamentary situation, with $1.1 trillion we are considering without an amendment, without a single member on either side of the aisle being able to propose an amendment to make it better. My friends, this is a recipe for corruption. It's a recipe for corruption. A few people, a very few people, not all 100 members here or 435 on the other side, but a handful of people behind closed doors work, and then 48 hours or so, or whatever it is, before the vote, it's presented to us as take it or leave it, with the choice being, well, you can sign on to it. I know you'll probably have to, quote, you'll have to hold your nose, but we have no choice. Well, my friends, I believe we do have a choice. I believe we do have a choice. I believe that we should behave in the manner which our constituents expect us to behave. That is, take up a bill, have an amendment, have a debate, have a discussion. Do what we are supposed to do. And if the Democrat leader wants to block us, then let him take the responsibility for doing so. But now we're faced with a $1 trillion spending bill that includes numerous policy provisions which have never been debated and discussed, pork barrel spending that would never stand the light of day, never, ever. And I'll be talking about some of them. I'll give you some examples of the pork that has been snuck into this bill. Let me give you a few examples here that I think might interest our constituents. This is in this bill, in law, $3.6 million for 30 vineyards, breweries, and distilleries to build tasting rooms, conduct whiskey production feasibility studies, and other alcohol marketing gimmicks. Yeah, the one thing we really want to do is give money to help alcohol marketing. Alcohol marketing. $100,000 in funding to sell goat whey sodas and soft-serve frozen goat yogurt. $247,677, I don't know how they came up with that number, to develop pecan snacks. $49,750 to introduce Americans to flavored beef bratwurst and beef chili. If there's anything I think the American people need to be educated and introduced to, it's bratwurst and chili. $49,990 for spinning raw alpaca fiber into a very fine yarn. $42,000 to produce cheese from buffalo milk. $250,000 to produce and market lamb jerky. $26,270 to determine the feasibility of producing blue cornmeal from Navajo corn, and $200,000 to make apple pies. The list goes on and on. My favorite, my friends, of many of them, is a thing called the Catfish Inspection Office. The Catfish Inspection Office, most of us enjoy the catfish, and we appreciate the benefits to our nutrition and, of course, a sizable industry that around catfishing. So what we have, again, this year is a Department of Agriculture Catfish Inspection Office. Now, there's a Department of Agriculture Catfish Inspection Office, although the FDA also has a similar inspection office, and the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, has issued more than 6 reports calling the U.S. Department of Agriculture Catfish Inspection Office, quote, wasteful and duplicative. As a result of this protectionist program, an estimated $15 million of your tax dollars will per year will be spent on enabling government bureaucrats to impose barriers on foreign catfish importers, which will in turn increase the price of catfish for American consumers, restaurants, and seafood producers. So, my friends, in this bill, among those that I just told you, is just $15 million every year of your tax dollars that are going to be spent for a catfish inspection office, and that is the kind of thing that happens when you get to this date at the end of the year with a mammoth bill worth $1 trillion. It is too ripe. It is too ripe for the picking by the pork barrelers that we have here in the United States Senate and the House. So there's just a couple more real quick. $1.7 million for the Senate kitchen exhaust systems upgrades, $65 million for Pacific Coast salmon restoration for states. Now, on its face of it, you would think that money for Pacific Coast salmon restoration would be a very, perhaps, beneficial expenditure of your tax dollars. Guess what? The state of Nevada is included in this $65 million salmon restoration. Now, a cursory glance at a map of the United States might indicate that the state of Nevada is not exactly an ideal place for salmon restoration. But they're going to get some of these millions of dollars, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with the makeup of the United States Senate from Nevada. $15 million for an incentive program that directs the Department of Defense to overpay on contracts by an additional 5% if the contractor is a native Hawaiian-owned company. So, if you have a contract with a native-owned company, the Department of Defense does, automatically you'll add 5% of taxpayers' dollars. There's language that makes it easier for the Department of Defense to enter into no-bid contracts. If there's anything that we have, in my years, I have seen that lend itself to outrageous spending, of course, it's no-bid contracts. The Department of Defense may eliminate competition and use a no-bid contract for a, quote, product of original thinking and was submitted in confidence by one source. That's interesting. Well, anyway, there's many more of those. So I'm proud of what this Congress has done this year. There are many good things that have been done. There have been the Defense Authorization Bill. There has been, for the first time, a budget. For the first time, we have reformed education. For the first time, we have done so many things. We have finally sent a bill to the President's desk repealing and replacing Obamacare. But the way to end the bill with this is really an embarrassment. So here we are looking at $1 trillion, and I want to talk a little bit about particularly national defense. I am proud, I could not be more proud, of the bipartisanship that has been involved in both Democrat and Republican in the Senate Armed Services Committee, and the bipartisanship with our friends on the other side of the Capitol. We have come up with legislation which has been described as the biggest reform bill for defense in 30 years. And I'm proud of it. And we have a lot further to go. But we had hours and hours of hearings, hours and hours of markup. On the floor, we had over 130 amendments considered on the floor of the Senate to the defense authorization bill. We did things which we have never done before. For example, completely reforming the retirement system for the military. Now, it used to be you had to stay 20 years before you received any financial benefit. Now, after 2 years and 1 month, you can get into a matching funds agreement with the federal government. So now, instead of 85% of those who join the military never receiving financial benefit, now 85% of those that join will receive it. So I'm very proud. I'm very proud, and I'm very proud of the work that I did with my colleague from Rhode Island, Senator Reid, as well as our friends from the other side of the aisle. And then, at the last minute, these earmarks, these pork barrel projects, these egregious, wasteful projects are airdropped in a 2,000-page, I believe it's a 2,000-page bill, whatever it is, it's huge, in a bill, and we see it for the first time about, well, it was 10 or 12 o'clock last night, and they want us to vote on it tomorrow. That's crazy. So what the appropriators did, they included over 150 different programs and initiatives where the appropriations exceeded what they were authorized, totaling $9.4 billion. By passing the defense bill authorization, we set an expectation on how to allocate funds. This was obviously completely broken. Example, the appropriators included $160 million for Humvees, even though the Army requested $0 for Humvees. We had hearings on this. We had hearings on the issue of what the Army needed. And it was abundantly clear that the Army did not need any more Humvees. So somehow the appropriators decided that there'd be $160 million for Humvees, $7 million for a machine gun, 5 times the current size of the program. Again, our Army and Department of Defense said we didn't need it. But here's the worst one of all, my friends, and it will not surprise anyone that it's manufactured in Alabama. There's $225 million for the addition of a joint high-speed vessel, which is, of course, manufactured in Alabama. Now, this will be the 12th ship of this class, the 12th of its class. The Navy's requirements was 10 vessels. Remember, this is $225 million for this vessel. The Navy said, stop at 10. We stopped at 10. Last year, the appropriators added one for $225 million. This year, another $225 million. By my calculation, that's $450 million for 2 joint high-speed vessels that the military, the Navy, and the Department of Defense said we don't need, nor want. What could we have done for the men and women in the military for that $450 million that we just wasted on 2 ships that the Navy and the military said they didn't need? It's just unacceptable. The bill includes over $2 billion in funding. $2 billion now, my friends. I'm not making this up. In funding, almost $1.2 billion on top of the $1 billion for medical research within the Defense Department. Now, my friends, I want to emphasize I am all in for medical research. I think medical research is vital to the future of all Americans. But what in the world does most of this have to do with the defense appropriations? Nothing. Nothing. It is the Willie Sutton syndrome at its best. Mr. Sutton was once asked why he robbed banks. And Mr. Sutton said, because that's where the money is. And my friends, in defense is where the money is. So we have seen this gradual creeping up of funding out of defense funds for programs, which I will read a few of, that have nothing to do with defense. And I'll say again, I am for funding for medical research. I think it's vital and I think it's important. But someone is going to have to explain to me how tuberculosis, autism, lung cancer, Gulf War illness is, well, actually that's one of them, spinal cord injury, ovarian cancer. Those research funds should come out of the Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Bill, not out of defense at a time of sequestration when we have planes that can't fly and guns that won't shoot and ships that can't sail. So what have we done? Let me show you what they've done this year. You can see the gradual increase beginning in 1992. There was about $20 million, I guess, something like that. And then in 94, it went up, and then something happened that went down. And then you can see the gradual, almost steady increase of funding for medical research as the funding for defense has remained constant or even in some cases reduced. So what have we done this year, my dear friends? Here it is. Here it is, $2.2 billion of your tax dollars that is now earmarked for, quote, medical research. All of them worthy causes. Almost none of them have anything to do with guns, ships, planes, barracks, or medical research that is directly connected to our military. The Army, to add on to that, the Army received an additional $16 million to conduct research on Parkinson's disease, and the list goes on and on. So what have we got here? By the way, the bill also includes 9 Buy America provisions, unquote, which will inevitably add to weapon systems and other contracting costs. The Buy America provisions are a handout to the labor unions and are employed to direct defense business to companies in a particular state. Now, Mr. President, I won't waste the time of this committee to go too much longer, except to say that today we see an interesting political environment in America. We see on the Republican side, on my side, we see the leading candidates, people who are basically seeking the nomination of the Republican Party because they are running against Washington, that they don't want business as usual, that they are frustrated by the fact that, in their view, that the Congress doesn't work for them. And the approval rating of Congress is consistently somewhere in the teens. And Americans are frustrated, and they're angry, and many of them who support an individual who says, we'll make America great again. It'll be huge. A language which is not very specific, but inspires them to see change take place. Well, although I disagree with that, and I think that we have a record this year that we can be proud of in many respects, whether it be education reform or whether it be finally sending a bill to the president's desk to repeal Obamacare, or fixing education, as I mentioned, or better ways of defending the nation with many reforms of how the Pentagon does business. There are many things I am very proud of, and I think we can return to our constituents and tell them that for the first time this year, that Congress has done some things that will be helpful to the everyday man and woman who has not received really much benefit over the last 8 years since the economic collapse. But then we send them this Christmas turkey. We send them a bill laden with millions and millions and millions of dollars in wasteful and unnecessary spending. We send them a bill that purchases a ship for $225 million, which nobody wants or needs. Then, my friends, it gives substance and reason behind the frustration that many of our constituents feel. Now, it's probably over for this year. I think it's probably going to be a situation where there's sufficient votes to pass this, quote, omnibus bill with worth $1.1 trillion, $1.1 trillion of taxpayers' money without a single amendment, not a single one, not a single amendment. And then we'll go home and enjoy Christmas and then come back in January, hopefully refreshed. But I hope that in January we could make a commitment to the American people that we'll stop doing business this way, that we'll stop waiting until the last days and have these extensions that last for 2 days or 3 days before the threat of a government shutdown, which no American that I've ever met enjoys, and learn that the American people expect better of us than this process. I'm not proud of this. In fact, I'm a bit ashamed, because particularly on defense, there are so many critical needs of the men and women who are serving in our military. Their carriers are going on 10-month cruises. Some of our men and women who are serving are on their 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th tour to Afghanistan. And even now, many are going back to Iraq. And they will be going back, my friends. They will be going back. And they will also be in Syria, because I predict to you now there will be another attack on the United States of America, because this president cannot lead. And we are paying the price of a feckless foreign policy that is a disgrace and will be judged by historians as one of the low points in American history as far as national security is concerned. So instead of providing for those critical needs, and I guarantee you I can come up with billions of dollars of critical needs. And by the way, I can also come up with reforms that will save billions of dollars in our legislation. And we're proud of that. For example, we require 7.5% per year for 4 years reduction in the size of the staffs in the military. That will save over $3 billion over time. I'm proud of that. And so we come to the American people with a defense bill that is lean and it is efficient, and we have a long way to go, but we're proud of it. And then we look at things like this. It's not acceptable. So, Mr. President, I hope that I don't have to stand up here again next year. I hope that we can finally sit down and work for the American people, and that means taking up the appropriations bills one by one by one and giving them the same attention that the defense bill got. The defense bill got 2 weeks, 133 amendments, debate on every issue conceivable concerning national defense. We need to do that with each of the 12 appropriations bills. And that way we can give the American people the product that is the most efficient, that is the least wasteful, and something we can be proud of. So I urge my colleagues to understand that this legislation on the defense appropriations part of it does not help America defend itself in these difficult times. In fact, because of the waste, because of the pork barrel spending in this, because of the earmarks that are in it, we have actually harmed the ability of our nation to defend itself and the welfare of the men and women who are serving. That's something we cannot be proud of.